So next up, friends and relatives, it gives me honor and a privilege to introduce our next speaker that will be sharing with each and every one of you. And Daniel R. Wildcat is a Yuki member of the Muskogee Nation in Oklahoma. Dr. Wildcat received an interdisciplinary PhD from the University of Missouri, Kansas City. And in his service as teacher and administrator of Haskell Indian Nations University spans 37 years. In 1994, he partnered with the Hazardous Substance Research Center in Kansas State University to create Haskell Environmental Research Studies Center. He is a noted speaker on traditional ecological knowledges and currently the principal investigator of a $20 million 5-year NSF-funded project to develop the Rising Voices Changing Coasts Research Hub at Haskell. He is author and editor of several books, including Power and Place, Indian Education in America, with Vine Deloria Jr., and also Destroying Dogma, Vine Deloria's Legacy on Intellectual America, as well as with Steve Pavlik, Red Alert, Saving the Planet with Indigenous Knowledge, and most recently on Indigenuity, Learning the Lessons of Mother Earth, which explores Indigenous ingenuity and indigenuity. Ladies and gentlemen, warm welcome to Daniel Wildcat.
Is there a handheld microphone that maybe I could use? I hate standing behind a podium. This time of the day, I don't know how you're feeling. Hey, everyone, stand up. Stand up and just stretch a little bit. You've been sitting here most of the afternoon. Just stretch, turn around. I wonder if I can get a handheld mic. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Mic test 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you hear me, folks? Okay, I'm going to walk around because I've been sitting listening to the fantastic panel discussion and everything. I wish I could have been here this morning to hear my brother Greg Cajete give his presentation. Greg, are you here? Oh, there's Greg right there. All right. Good to see you, Greg. Yeah. So 20 minutes is what they told me I have, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a quick argument to all of you folks, and I know I'm kind of, as my maternal grandmother would have said, preaching to the church choir. Most of you get it, what I'm talking about. What I'm going to talk about is indigenous knowledges. And what I'm going to argue is that indigenous knowledges are the antidote to the destruction of the age of the Anthropocene. We just heard, right? How horrible things are going on. Loss of biodiversity, loss of natural habitat, loss of species. I mean, we got a species extinction background rate that, depending on who you listen to, some people say it's 10 times higher than what we've ever had before. Others, I'm talking scientists who are typically conservative, say, no, it's on the order of 100 times higher. The extinction rates that we are experiencing right now. So guess what? The age of the Anthropocene so far has been pretty bad for the planet. And it's kind of ironic, isn't it? Because that name tells us where the problem lies. It lies with humankind. Now, not all of humankind. Some of humankind. And it's the people who think somehow that justice is really about just us, the two-leggeds, the 10-fingered beings. That is the problem. And so what we need is the antidote to that worldview. Now, I'm making generalizations. I know that. But remember, a generalization is just that. It doesn't mean it applies to every indigenous people on the planet. But I've been fortunate being at Haskell for almost 4 decades now, meeting so many of our tribal peoples in the contiguous 48 and in Alaska. And then in the last 20 years, I've done travel across the world. And what I'm beginning to realize is that it doesn't matter whether you're in Africa, Central Asia, the Pacific Rim, South America, Latin America, where there are indigenous people, you find people who possess a way of understanding their place in the world that is very different than the just us anthropocentric view that has given us the age of the Anthropocene. So let's begin with 4 quick points. Okay? Now, again, these are generalizations, but I think they're accurate, and I think they give us some food for thought. First point, can we leave? How cool is it, by the way? I was looking at that. I said, WILD12. Well, I guess, I don't know, Wildcat was here 12, for 12. You ask a wildcat to come speak. Well, I'm glad to do so. First point, let's leave WILD12 with a commitment to walk away from here, leaving behind the miseducative idea that we live in a world full of natural resources. Not in Greg's traditions, not in my traditions. We live, folks, in a world full of natural relatives. We're all related. And we find out, or I should say, scientists now have found out, what my Zoyaha relatives have said since time immemorial, those relationships, that kinship extends to the land, to the air, to the water, to the plants, and to the animals. I don't know what it's like in your human family, but in my human family, if you treat your aunties and your uncles like resources, and that dirt road's long enough, and they see you coming, they're turning off the lights and closing the blinds and acting like no one's home because they don't want to be treated like resources. And yet that's the way we treat the balance of our natural kin on this planet. Think of what we could do to change the relationship to this idea of wilderness by just saying, we're not protecting resources, we're not managing wisely resources. What we are doing is protecting kin and reconnecting in a much broader, intimate way with a family that humankind thinks somehow they're not a part of, or they're above, right? And can control and can manage. We should live as good relatives in this world. If we do that, if we live as good relatives, then we can address the second point I'd like to make. So we're going to walk away from living in a world full of natural resources and acknowledge the fact we live in a world full of natural relatives. Then we can counterbalance the fixation many Americans have with something called inalienable rights. I mean, we just went through a pandemic, and, you know, where I grew up in Oklahoma and southern Kansas, there were a lot of people who wouldn't even wear a mask in a pandemic because they would tell you, you're violating my inalienable rights. And I kept wanting to ask, and I did ask one person, I said, do you have any unalienable responsibilities? Think of what happens when we walk away from the world full of resources and live in a world full of relatives, because then we can shift all of the money and the time and the resources we spend on arguing about who's got what right to what water, what land on the planet, and say, no, we're not going to have that argument anymore. Our question is, how are we going to be responsible and live in right relations with relatives? If we can figure out how to extend that knowledge, to institutionalize it in education, in politics, wouldn't it be great to have an indigenous candidate for the President of the United States get up and give a lecture about unalienable responsibilities in a planet full of natural kin, not resources? It's a slight shift. It's a profound shift in a worldview. You're flipping it. It's no longer all about us. Now, one of the problems I get sometimes when I give a presentation like this, people say, oh, okay, he's going to go back to this romantic notion of the native and the noble savage. And I'm going to say, no, excuse me, that image, that stereotype was the product of Europeans. That was their idea. The reality, it seems to me today, and it's one that we can all embrace, is that the truth of the matter is indigenous people, and by the way, I want to express extreme gratitude. I should have done this when I first came out. Extreme gratitude to the Osite Sakowai, the great Sioux nations, those Lakota and Dakota speakers whose homeland we are in, for allowing this meeting to be here. I mean, I want to express extreme gratitude to you for opening your home for this convening, because what it embodies in your own teachings is that great phrase I've learned from my Lakota and Dakota students through many years at Haskell, is we are all related, right? We are all related. We are all relatives. And they say this in their prayers and their invocations. That's a good lesson for us to hold on to. Now, one of the problems I run is people, they'll say, oh, well, you're romanticizing. There's nothing romantic about the view I'm presenting. It's realism. It turns out it's indigenous realism now that science is beginning to catch on and say, yeah, you know, we are all related. That, yeah, you know, we can't understand everything by just dissecting it. That was the old mechanical model. We're all just machines. We know better. We're not machines, we're living. We are part of living systems. And that's why, again, there's nothing romantic about referring to Mother Earth. So if we take those first 2 points, We're going to disabuse of ourselves that this mistaken idea we live in a world full of resources. We don't. We live in a world full of natural relatives. We're going to counterbalance. I don't know of any people who admire and protect really liberties and rights of individuals than indigenous people, but they also don't stop there. Their political theories and their notions of governance always entail responsibilities too. So we've got to counterbalance that inalienable rights with unalienable responsibilities. Okay? Then that opens the door for us to really focus on maybe one of the most deep-seated problems we have, and that is we still kind of have a hard time figuring what our place, our human place in nature is. You know, some people want to be above it. Some people want to emphasize how different we are, and therefore they think different means superior. Oh, but look how intelligent we are. Look at what we can do. Well, the bad news is if we look at what humans do, there's not really that strong a basis to think you're superior. You know, wolves and bears and wildcats never organize armies and go to war. They just are. We're trying to figure out who we are as humans. I'm going to argue that we're impoverished. Modern man is so impoverished because he has isolated himself from his kin, from the natural world, and thinks somehow he does, he's in charge, he's going to control it. We can't control it. We're not in charge, and yet we affect it tremendously with our institutions, the way we behave, the way we conduct ourselves. I think we need radical exercises of indigenuity, indigenous ingenuity. We need to exercise ancient indigenous wisdom to address modern problems. As Greg talked about, we have great agricultural traditions, fishing traditions, forest traditions, fire traditions. I think the third point I would make quickly here, because I know I'm probably running out of time. People say, well, you sound like you're against technology and progress. No, I'm not, certainly not against technology. I just think we need to indigenize our worldview relative to technology, right? Technology is useful if it benefits our community, strengthens a culture, and improves our communication. And unfortunately now we have created cultures that seem to erode each of those. Community, culture, and impoverish our communication. So, I'm not against technology. Progress is a little more difficult. I don't know if we can pull the anthropocentric character out of progress. Progress seems so connected to human comfort, human convenience, and human capital gains. What people think they can make money out of by being progressive. If Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are so anxious to get to Mars, I'll contribute the first $100 if they'll agree to go next week. because that's the thinking that has created the Anthropocene. Oh, we've torn this planet up. Let's just build a spaceship and colonize someplace else. No. So I don't want to be just always against something. I want to be for something. So this occurred to me when I was writing my book, Red Alert. I said, what am I for? I said, I think I know what I'm for. And here's where all of you young scientists, man, I'm an old man now, but I tell you what, I almost think I'd like to be, if I could start over again, I wish I had thought about engineering. Because think of what you can do with engineering if you throw out that anthropocentric view and you start thinking about how can we create systems that support life. So, here's what I thought. I'm not real high on this anthropocentric notion of progress. Let's replace it. Think of the world we can create if we say what we're really about is promoting systems of life enhancement on this planet. Not human comfort, convenience, and capital gains, but life enhancement for the water, for the earth, for the wind, for the air, for the plants and the animals. There are some architects that are working on that now. And all of you that are involved in regenerative ag, regenerative or circular economics, those are fields that we should be diving deeply into now, and there's good work to do. But it has to be framed in that different worldview. We don't have all the answers. No one has all the answers. But my final point, and I want to thank you all for, in a late afternoon, being attentive. Although I can't tell if any of you have your eyes closed and are nodding off. I don't like this lighting situation. It's dark. I can't see your faces. But here's the last point I would like to make. There is nothing romantic about the notion that in indigenous traditions, the plants and the animals and the wind and the water and the earth were our teachers. This isn't hyperbole, but you have to pay attention. You have to be there. You have to be responsible, respectful, attentive, mindful. And there's a lot that we can still learn. That the oceans can teach us, that our rivers can teach us, that plants, that animals can teach us. And that's another reason we need to protect their homelands, and we need to figure out how we can live in such a way that we're not threatening their homelands. Like I say, so far in the age of the Anthropocene, it's been all about us, humankind, and that's the problem. So, folks, I'm going to ask you, let's consider taking seriously the wisdom, the knowledges that sits in places and held by people who've lived there for hundreds and thousands, maybe in their traditions they tell, since creation. They know something about how to live well in that place. Sanlai Koyasate, thank you so much for being a attentive audience, and yeah.